everybody. So we're starting our next session, Artists and the Role of Art in an XR World. So I'm just going to get started with my presentation. There'll be 4 of us presenting, so I'll just get started. I'm Estella. I'm a virtual reality artist, and I work with magic. I'm an artist in residence with Google VR, which means I work closely with Tilt Brush. I paint in virtual reality, and I create objects and figures and environments and worlds that you can walk into. So you can step into my worlds that I paint, and you can explore it. This is an example of a skybox that I created that's like inside of an iceberg. Like, what would that feel like if you were walking into that space? And this is all done within Tilt Brush. And I really, really love what I can do right now. And I didn't know that like a virtual reality artist could be a thing, but I guess I am one, and that's what I do now. As a developer and a designer, I often seek the intersections of what it means for technology and art when they merge together. There's a quote by John Lasseter that I really love. The art challenges the technology, and the technology inspires the art. I think my role right now as a virtual reality artist is very clear. I feel like right now I should be exploring and pushing boundaries and intently investigating what it means to be a visual designer. I need to make images that communicate and evoke feeling and touches people's hearts. That's really important to me as like a storyteller, a visual storyteller. And some of the work I do, I kind of research what it means to create a 2D image and evolve it into 3D. I like to see like what that visual language might be and how that can be transferred over. And like what that is right now, what the visual language of virtual reality and augmented reality is, like I don't think that's very clear right now, and we're all still trying to figure that out right now. I think something that's like cool to remember is that like in terms of visual language, when movies first came out, like a lot of people didn't, like when they first saw this scene, they thought that this train was going to bust through this theater screen, and they were like running out of the theater. And I feel like that's where we are with VR right now, because we'll try experiences, and we'll be like, oh my God, I felt like I was actually there. I felt like this was going to hit me. That's how I kind of equate where we are with VR right now, like this really early rudimentary version of filmmaking. Yeah. And so like, what do? I kind of do a lot of work in studying like how Disney and Pixar, how they started and how they worked with the technology that they were given in order to create a new craft. They were trying to investigate how to make a new art form, and I'm really, really interested in that. So I like to push the boundaries of what I can do with technology. This is an example of like taking a 2D photograph and expanding it, evolving it, extruding it into a 3D figure. I really love doing that. I think it's also important to think about like how to make images that are impactful for the masses. I think if you're looking into companies that might be doing that now, Baobab Studios is doing that. Google Spotlight Stories, they're spending a lot of time to investigate like how to tell stories that talk about the intersectionalities of like tech, art, and storytelling. They're like really trying to find the blend of the three of those. And I feel like in XR, there's a little bit more to that as well. I feel like there's going to be an aspect that we didn't think about from filmmaking or movie making. I think there'll be an aspect of emotional agency. And Maureen Fan kind of mentioned this yesterday during her keynote. She talked about how there's a part in one of their experiences where, depending on how you react to the, like Mac and Cheese, the aliens in their experience, like they might act differently towards you, so the story changes. So I'm like really compelled by the idea of like emotional agency being like perhaps a new component to this new form of art making that we're gonna explore. So just to kind of summarize it real quick, like I think that the role of the artist in XR is like really, really clear and really exciting. I think it has a lot to do with like pushing the limits of the tools, creating something from nothing, and just making magic. Yep, that's me. You can find me online.
Hello, everybody. Just give me a second here. Whoa, you're not supposed to see that yet. Okay, so my name is Shem, everybody. I'm here to talk about building an AR game inside of a museum and what that means for artists who are working in the XR space right now. So a little bit of background about myself. I'm one of two co-founders of the company Breachgate. We focus on virtual reality and augmented reality experiences both for work and play. We released a game last year, Snow Day. It's like a multiplayer snowball fighting game. But we're really interested in seeing how we can provide immediate value for people in general, whether they're looking for it in entertainment or outside of that. So I know that like a lot of people kind of have definitions of art, and I think that's one of the really interesting things about doing this installation in the Museum of Modern Art is that's really the era where people started questioning what art was. And I guess for the sake of my argument, I'm going to say that artists turn technology into art. So if you think of any medium, whether it's paint, whether it's pixels, an artist comes in and they go, oh man, I want this to have meaning, and then they convert that into something that either has meaning or pushes the limits on human creativity or something to that effect, right? So I kind of came to this conclusion through like a really roundabout way. I started off with formal training in drawing and painting at a pretty early age. And I still draw and paint for work and for pleasure. But at the same time, I also started learning how to program. So this eventually led me towards studying mathematics in school. It never occurred to me that coordinate spaces had anything to do with art. And so nowadays, I write shaders and I write music. I do gameplay programming, interaction programming, all of which kind of have this interplay between mathematics and art. So like a paintbrush, you can use the tool that you have as well as just basic concepts inside of mathematics to create really wonky, weird experiences that people can walk into or they can view on a canvas. And I think this is really why artists are so important in this new frontier because we really don't know like how we're going to use augmented reality in order to explore art. So that takes me to Play SF MoMA. Working with them really solidified this idea of kind of exploring what art is. Play SF MoMA, it's a museum initiative, and it encourages the development of avant-garde and experimental games. And what we were going to make was experimental by the nature of augmented reality just being so new. A friend of mine dropped my name to the folks at the initiative, and they invited a variety of Bay Area artists to a 2-weekend hackathon using the Google Tango device. This is the team. I pretty much met them there. I came there, I didn't know anybody, and they're like, oh, hey, like, do you know how to use Unity? And I was like, yeah, I know Unity. And so they're like, great, we'll work together. So Jeremy, he's not pictured. He actually joined a little bit later. I work with him at Breachgate. Tilde Ann Thurium, she's at Pinterest. She's a software engineer. And Jackie Hassa, she does alternative reality games. It's the kind of stuff where like you get together in a park and you just like imagine you're in a different world and try to play a game out of that. Really fascinating stuff. So what we came up with is a modern poem generator in the Dada tradition. And I don't know how much you guys know about the Dada movement, but most people think of this. That's a urinal, and that is art. Or at least a lot of people challenge that as being art. So the guy who made this, his name was Marcel Duchamp, and he famously submitted it to the Society of Independent Artists in 1917. And the idea was that if you were an independent artist and you paid the fee to get into the show, they were going to let you in. But they rejected it because it was not art. The movement that he actually left the board on that, and then he would kind of be known as one of the champions of the Dada movement. One of the areas in which they kind of challenged the established way of doing art was poetry. There was a process called random poetry generation in which they would cut out words and letters from newspapers, throw them into a hat, and then pull them out, and then paste them onto a piece of paper, and based off of whatever they got, that was a poem. The funny thing is that is an algorithm for poetry. And we ourselves as humans have some kind of algorithm somewhere in our head that generates poetry. Is it less or more valid? And that's really one of the things that they were questioning. And we thought that this was really interesting because this is kind of like, this is one of the founding moments in history for modern art. So we decided that we were going to create our own algorithm for generating poetry, except it's going to implement augmented reality. Basically, one player would be at this custom console where they'd have a bunch of buttons that they could press and like sliders that they could adjust. And then they would be able to hit a button to change whatever line of poetry was there. The other person would have a Tango device and they would walk around the space gathering the lines of poetry that were generated. So you could see like how the person at the control panel could move the line of poetry around and force the person in the augmented reality device to run around the space. And you can think of this in the context of a museum. Oh, actually, they walked deliberately along the space because you can't run in a museum. So here's an example of someone walking deliberately. You can see on his screen he has a thought bubble that he is gathering. Fortunately, the person at the control panel isn't forcing him to move around too much. So he's gathering it over there. This is a person at the control panel. And this was the first iteration that we had of this experience. And we have like a custom control panel because we figured it would be much better than a person hitting keys on a MacBook in a museum. And then at the very end, they get a poetry. They get a poem. So they get a poem. And in this case, the randomly generated poem goes something like this. Talk to her again when she's feeling better and she may offer up her chin. If not, it was all about Joe Biden memes, and I forgot what they told me. It goes on. Yeah, Pulitzer Prize winning. So that was the 2-weekend hackathon. The SF MoMA asked us to come back to it and do a few more iterations. So about a week or two of kind of We made another fab for it, so now there were more sliders. You could actually move the bubble around in space with fine control. There was UIs and tutorials and stuff. And then this piece was shown as part of a small art pop-up during GDC with a bunch of other augmented reality and kind of just experimental avant-garde games. So I learned a ton from this. So first of all, AR, it has the potential to enrich a lot of museum experiences. And I think this is in two ways. First of all, I think that there's a lot of art that is really hard to kind of understand conceptually inside of a modern art museum. For instance, the Dada art movement, right? Randomly generated poetry. Is that art? And I think going through the process of creating it through an augmented reality experience is a way to kind of illustrate the process of creating poetry in a different way. But it can also be a medium unto itself. So you could see the experience of creating the poetry as being in itself a work of art. Another thing is don't reinvent the wheel. You're here to make art. One of the things that we did at the very beginning was we chose to use a lot of the built-in stuff that Unity has. So for instance, the multiplayer was really amazing because it was really easy just to jump in, set up 2 different devices that were not even the same kind of device, and then have them talk with one another. That saved us a lot of time instead of us rolling out our own multiplayer solution. Another really cool thing was something called UnoJoy. It lets you turn an Arduino into a gamepad controller, which then you can just plug directly into Unity and suddenly have your own custom input, which is really rad for installations. Another thing is collaborate. So you might have noticed that not everybody there had a technical background. And I think it's really important when you make electronic art to realize that collaborating with people who have different skill sets will make your idea resonate with a lot more people. And then finally, just kind of going back to the whole Marcel Duchamp, what is art? Always question the definition of art and what it means to be an artist, whether it's using mathematics, whether it's using pencil and paper or brushes, or using the Google Tango in augmented reality. I personally don't look at Marcel Duchamp's fountain with the same adoration as a Rembrandt, but I always admire his ability to question the definitions and the expectations of what art was during his time. And I think that's really what XR needs right now. Thanks.
Testing. OK, good. All right. So about a year and a half ago, almost 2 years now, a gallery asked to show one of my video pieces in a show at the former Perry Rubenstein Gallery in Hollywood. This is the piece. About a week before the show was to open, the curator contacted me and said, "Oh, by the way, the gallery would really like this to be interactive." I'm like, "OK." I'm like, "All right, I'll get right on that." I immediately panicked. This is an accurate description of basically me the whole time. But yeah, a week's not much time to thoughtfully figure out how to do something like this. So yeah, just super, super, super panicked. But this was also a really good opportunity, like right out of grad school. And so I just kind of wondered, like, what am I going to do? Do I dust off the Arduino? Shrug, I don't know. But I'd just come from a media arts program and had a few tricks up my sleeve, but still, like I said, this is like not a good recipe for like a thoughtful, lovely, piece at a Hollywood gallery. So how was I gonna solve this? So I started discussing it with my partner, Ben, who was working with early Vive hardware at the time. We really wanted to bring this single-channel video into VR in a way that was kind of unexpected and interactive. So we ended up just like working away, and we ended up building the piece in just under that week and premiered it at the gallery with rave reviews. So success. 3VR, for short, took on a life of its own and has since been featured at Slam Dance, TIFF, and in numerous other festivals. Its success was not something we really could have predicted, so we kind of just wanted to share this process and what we've discovered along the way. My name is Kate Parsons. I'm an educator, video artist, VR artist. I'm based here in LA.
And I'm Ben Vance. creator of Irrational Exuberance on the Vive, and I've been making games and VR and interactive art, that kind of thing, for about 15 years.
And together, we're the collaborative entity Float. We also collaborate with other artists, with other musicians, most recently with Within, Toro and Moi, SF MoMA, and Spirith Megger's gallery here in LA. 3VR begins in sort of a darkened gallery setting. There's abstract video projected on 3 walls around you. As a viewer kind of walks around the gallery and approaches the videos react to you, like sonically and visually. One of the pieces kind of just becomes this large portal that envelops you and allows the viewer to access the other 2 worlds and the other 2 realms within the experience. So why was 3VR liminal reality so successful? First, one-to-one movement is natural and comfortable. Viewers can walk around and inspect the work just like they ordinarily would. But here, the art, it transforms. It just bathes and immerses the viewer in color and sound, pattern, light. It's pretty much unlike anything else in reality. And for many people, it's been profoundly emotional. We've had people kind of tear up. We've had people cry, which is, by the way, how you know you're doing your job right, if you make people cry in VR. Just kidding, sort of. But anyways, I mean, fundamentally, people just also love to stick their head into art. That's what we've learned. It's transgressive. It allows people to behave in ways that they ordinarily wouldn't or couldn't in a gallery setting. So we were really thrilled when 3VR got picked up for Oculus and Kaleidoscope's Dev Lab this last fall. This was an incubator that took place in LA. While we were there, we were able to kind of workshop the piece into, like, I don't know, kind of a much larger project and container. So 3VR Liminal Realities is now what we call the Float Museum, or a part of the Float Museum. This is a virtual reality platform for artists and audiences to reinvent the museum experience. And there's a lot of other VR galleries out there. Demoda, Dad Digital is doing some cool things. The New Museum is doing some really awesome stuff. And I think we're all kind of approaching the topic in a myriad of different ways. I think what we all have in common is that we're just really excited about the type of work that's being made right now and the type of work that is yet to be made. Because what we've really found is that VR can remove the constraints of temporal, spatial, and physical reality. We've started working on have a multiplayer version set right now that allows players to experience the work together. We've been using normal VR for this, Max Weisel's technology, and it's really pretty exciting.
All right, hi. So working on this project actually kind of produced a shift in our thinking about art and VR. And so I'm just going to take you through a little bit of that. So when we talk about art, you know, we can talk about a lot of different mediums, painting, sculpture, all the things that you're probably used to. And the cool thing about VR, to me, is that it includes so many of the senses that you can really import any of those into it. So what's great about that is we can now replicate and distribute forms of art that have historically been like really difficult to do. So if we want to digitize performance art or installation art, we could do that now. And so it kind of gives us an opportunity to broaden and kind of deepen people's access to the arts. So apart from just replicating drawings and paintings, which is relatively easy, in VR we could theoretically do that with almost everything. We could maybe access all of art history if we wanted to, including some of those more difficult mediums. So that's awesome. But of course, with VR, we have all these other input capabilities now, which Shem and Estelle talked about earlier, spatial motion, voice. There's just all these other things just kind of hanging around really close by, just waiting to be used. And what happens when we start turning those back to actually create some of those mediums, like tilt brush, painting, drawing, all of those kinds of things. So the thing that is extra exciting for me is that you've got a computer sitting right there, like it's got to be kind of powerful to run VR at all, right? It needs a decent GPU and decent CPU. So now you're talking about things like interaction, complex data visualization and simulation technologies, and these could be considered as more tools in the toolbox, right? So instead of just feeding back to those mediums, we can do things we never could before. So with 3VR specifically, we used Unity to create kind of a scripted space that people move through, but it can really only exist there. It doesn't make sense in reality. And so the interfacing of all of these inputs and these mediums could potentially create whole new classes of art. We're just sort of at the very tip of this. So we're excited about artists revisiting familiar mediums, and we're also excited about artists who are going to be really working with experience itself, sculpting space, sculpting time, and sculpting dynamic systems. So, for example, nanopaintings, mutating sculpture performances, spatial video illusions, living and dying haptic ecosystems, recursive dance infinities, pastel embodied landscapes, biofeedback lithographies, freeze frame sandstorms, aging microarchitectures, things like that, obviously. For us, artists are really essential to pushing the boundaries of any medium forward, and VR is kind of this superset of everything, where everything's going to get really mixed up and interesting. We know that VR is not a fad. We found it to be very compelling and very powerful, but we also feel that not all artists and institutions realize this yet. There's a lot of hype, as you know. But artists create beauty, wonder, and surprise, and art reflects our humanity back to us and to each other. And it shows us universal truths. And this coming world of VR, AR, and MR is really, a limitless possibility. So we really need artists to help make sense of this world. There's going to be new complexities and new problems that develop as a result of these technologies as well. And we need artists there helping us find the meaning in it. So yes, we need artists to shape these emerging infinities. Thanks. Yes, we have like 2 minutes for Q&A. You can ask any of us, and we'll be around after the talk.
Testing. Okay, it works now. Yeah. And there is a mic over here, and we will just be over here after, too.
Questions?
Hello. Hi. I have a background in printmaking, and so I'm really interested to see, have you guys know anyone or yourself actually combine the very 2D printmaking, and art form into VR, XR?
I've done some letterpress work based off of the inspirations of the virtual reality work that I've done. So like the butterfly piece that you saw, I started with a 2D sketch, with pen and ink, and then I painted it in VR. And then I was like, I kind of want to have more texture in my 2D one, so I decided to bring it back to 2D and sketch it out, make a polymer plate of it, and letterpress a whole bunch of those, and then hand paint them. I've been kind of exploring a little bit more. I feel like 2D flat images don't have the tactility that I want anymore. So I'm kind of expanding more with my 2D stuff while the technology is still developing with 3D stuff at the same time.
Gotcha.
In the long run, I would imagine 3D printing would help accommodate for a lot of the 3D work that I do.
Yeah.
I don't know if that helps answers a little bit.
Yeah, that's actually really great. So you have already a mixed media with the...
Yeah, I always work in mixed medium, and yeah, I don't know how to integrate the digital with the traditional as much right now. It's just kind of relaying back and forth.
Cool.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think there's probably some ways that sort of graphic sensibility can translate into some really interesting things in space. I would love to see that. Please do that. That sounds amazing.
Yeah.
Quick question for VR artists. When you think about creating, a lot of content and really high quality content, what advice would you give?
Don't do that.
I mean, I guess should you?
No, seriously. The piece that we created was really just kind of a small idea and very focused, and yet it's been very compelling for people. So I think it's hard to. By all means, work hard and try to figure out the thing you're trying to figure out. But for us, just experimenting and keeping that lightweight, and then what's the big idea, and then honing in on that and trying to kind of go. So our project turned into a real exploration of spatial forms that change their shape as you move around, and that's kind of what it's all about.
So I think from my perspective, because we worked in a kind of hackathon style of working, usually you don't have that much time. So it's really about kind of going back to this point about finding what that core mechanic is. and really fleshing that out. And it doesn't mean that you won't end up with something that looks really good. It'll just be really focused on that point. And I think that's the main thing you want to bring into any of your work is know what you're making when you start.
Yeah. I want to kind of like second what everyone said, or third. Like have an intent when you go in and make sure everything that you do, like the shapes and the colors that you use should like feed that objective that you're trying to like create with that one image. I think that's really important. And I feel like that, for me, it has created the most compelling images that I've made so far.
Cool. Thanks.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think we're out, so thank you all.
Thank you, everybody.
Yeah, come find us.